I abandoned my family and I am okay with it. Back then, I thought my life was pretty much ideal. I lived in a nice house in a decent neighborhood, had a job that paid well enough to keep us comfortable, and was married to Clara, who I believed was the love of my life. We had a daughter, Sophie, who was just hitting her teenage years, and despite all the horror stories you hear about teenagers, she was a good kid. We did the usual family things, movie nights, weekend barbecues, and the occasional trip to the park. It was a simple life, but I was happy. Neighbors would often wave or stop by for a chat. They seemed friendly enough, always commenting on how lovely Clara's garden looked or how well-mannered Sophie was. But there was one neighbor who was a bit different. Occasionally, he would say something that seemed a bit off. Once, while I was mowing the lawn, he paused by the fence and asked how things were going at home. It was a normal question, nothing out of the ordinary, but the way he did it, like he was poking around for something more, caught me off guard. I brushed it off, told him we were all good, and continued on my way. That evening, I mentioned it to Clara, thinking it was odd but not much more. She laughed it off, saying he was probably just being nosy or maybe felt out of the loop. We didn't think much of it. Sophie was growing up fast, and I tried to be the kind of dad she could rely on. I wasn't one of those pushy sports parents, but I made sure she knew I supported her. Watching her play, cheering her on, it felt good. One time, we were over at Clara's parents' place for the annual summer barbecue. This event was something her family looked forward to every year, where everyone from uncles and aunts to cousins and family friends would gather. I generally liked these get-togethers, the laid-back vibe and the great food. But that day, something didn't sit right with me. Halfway through the afternoon, I noticed Clara was spending a lot of time with her phone. More than usual. She was always good at keeping it away during family time, saying it was important to be in the moment. But not that day. She kept stepping away, typing furiously, then coming back with a smile plastered on her face, as if nothing happened. At first, I didn't think much of it. Work could be demanding, or maybe a friend was reaching out to her about something important. It wouldn't be out of character for her to be helping someone out. But then, just by chance, I saw a glimpse of her screen. She was quick to switch apps, but not before I caught a heart emoji flash on her display. It caught me off guard. A heart emoji? Really? Since when did her work messages include heart emojis? Later, when everyone was gathered around the fire pit, laughing and sharing stories, Clara excused herself to check on something in the car. She was gone for what felt like too long for just grabbing something from the car. I offered to go with her, but she insisted on going alone. When she returned, there was a noticeable change in her mood. She was less involved, quieter. I thought about asking her about the constant checking of her phone, the heart emoji, her needing to suddenly go to the car by herself. But I ended up not bringing it up. I convinced myself I was making a big deal out of nothing. After all, Clara was straightforward and honest, or so I believed. And the heart emoji? Well, it's not uncommon for people to use them in all sorts of conversations, isn't it? Maybe it was just a friend. And maybe she did just need a moment alone when she went to the car. It was just a weird day. Nothing more. A few days later, I got home from work, tired but looking forward to spending the evening with Clara and Sophie. After I got in, I saw a piece of paper sticking out from some mail. It was a receipt from a fancy hotel downtown, the kind we always said we'd stay at for a special occasion but never did because it was expensive. The receipt had Clara's name on it and a date from the previous weekend, a time she said she was visiting her sister. I didn't know what to think. I tried telling myself there must be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was a surprise for me, or perhaps her sister had used her name for the booking. But something felt wrong. Later that week, while looking for a pair of socks in our bedroom, I found a small, wrapped box hidden at the back of Clara's closet. It wasn't my birthday or our anniversary, but there it was, a beautifully wrapped gift with no card or name on it. I held it, wondering if I should open it or ask Clara first. I decided to put it back, thinking maybe she would bring it up. Days passed, and she didn't. The box stayed hidden, and she never mentioned the hotel stay. We kept talking about everyday things like work and Sophie's school, but Clara never brought up anything about the hotel or the gift. I wanted to confront her, to ask her directly about the hotel receipt and the mysterious gift, but I hesitated. Part of me was afraid of the answer. So, I kept quiet, hoping whatever was happening would resolve itself, and we could go back to the way things were. Things started to change with Clara. She started coming home late more often. It wasn't just once in a while anymore. It became a regular thing. Whenever I asked, the reasons were always about work or needing some time alone, or meeting friends I hadn't heard of. Her mood seemed to change a lot too. One day she would be fine, and the next, she would snap over small things. I couldn't figure out why. It made me feel like I had to be careful around her, which was new for us. We used to talk about everything easily. So, one night, I decided to ask her what was going on. She came home late again, and I thought it was a good time to talk. When I brought it up, hoping she would tell me if something was bothering her, it didn't go well. She got defensive, said she was just stressed, and accused me of making a big deal out of nothing. We argued a bit, but it was clear we weren't going to solve anything. She ended the conversation by saying she was tired and went to bed early. One night, I got home late because of a safety training seminar at work. Clara had fallen asleep on the couch, with the TV still on. Her phone was on the table, screen lit up with a new message notification. It wasn't unusual for Clara to fall asleep watching TV, but the phone caught my attention. It was from someone named D, just a single heart emoji followed by a miss you text. I knew D was Daniel, a colleague of Clara's, but I never thought much of him before. I told myself I was going to just turn off the screen, but instead, I opened the message. There were dozens of messages, each one more personal than the last. Things like "can't wait to hold you again" and "last night was amazing, thinking of you." They had sent messages at all hours, times when Clara had told me she was stuck at work or out with her friends. I scrolled through their conversation history. They talked about meeting up, about how they needed to be careful not to get caught. Daniel sent Clara photos, nothing explicit, but personal and intimate, selfies from his car, pictures of a meal he cooked, saying he wished she was there to share it with him. Clara's replies were just as personal, telling Daniel she missed him and found it hard to be apart. It was clear they were involved, emotionally and physically. It wasn't just a fling, there was affection, planning, a desire to be together despite the risks. After a while, I took screenshots of their messages. I didn't know why I did it, maybe I thought I'd need proof later, or maybe I just needed something to hold on to because everything else felt like it was slipping away. I put Clara's phone back exactly where I found it and went to bed. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, I decided to confront her. It was just after dinner, and Sophie was upstairs in her room. I walked into the kitchen where Clara was cleaning up. I remember how normal everything seemed for a moment, and then I just blurted it out. I told her I knew about the affair. She looked at me, and I could see the panic set in. She tried to justify herself, saying things had been rough, that I hadn't been there for her. It was like she was trying to shift the blame onto me, making it sound as if her stepping out was somehow my fault. I've never felt so angry in my life. But it wasn't the kind of anger where you scream and shout. It was a deep, cold anger. I told her how betrayed I felt, how she broke our trust. She kept making excuses, trying to make herself look less guilty. Then Sophie came down. I don't think she meant to eavesdrop, she probably just heard us talking and got curious. She saw my face, then Clara's, and I could tell she knew something was wrong. Clara tried to switch gears, acting like we were just having a normal conversation, but Sophie wasn't fooled. She looked from Clara to me, asking with her eyes what was happening. I didn't know what to say to her. After a bit, I left. I needed to get away from Clara's attempts to smooth things over and from Sophie's confused looks. There was one thing I had to do, meet with Emily, Daniel's wife. I saw Emily outside her work on a day that looked much nicer than I felt inside. She walked out, looking like she was on her way to grab lunch, just like any other day for her. I walked up to her and just said it straight, "We need to talk about our spouses." She looked confused at first, then worried. I told her everything. How I found out, what I saw, everything about Clara and Daniel. Watching her face change as I talked was hard. She went from confused to shocked, and then I could see it hit her. She was hurt, really hurt. She didn't say much. She asked me what she was supposed to do now. Her voice was shaky, and it made me realize just how big of a news I had just dropped on her. I didn't have an answer for her. I was still trying to figure out my own next steps. After we talked, she just walked away. I felt awful. I had to tell her, but seeing how much it hurt her made me question if it was the right thing to do. I was a mess, too. I woke up the next day knowing it would be the last time I'd see my house the way it was. It felt odd, getting dressed in my own room, picking clothes I knew I'd wear for who knows how long. I chose simple stuff, jeans and a gray t-shirt, and my boots. I drove to the bank first thing. It was pretty straightforward. I asked the teller to take out half the savings from our account. She did it without asking too many questions, just a casual, "Big purchase?" I just nodded. She handed me the cash in an envelope, which I tucked away inside my jacket. Next, I hit an outdoor supply store. I picked up a few things, a sturdy backpack, a sleeping bag, a small tent, and a portable stove. I also grabbed a map and a compass. At the counter, I paid in cash. The guy there wished me luck on my trip. Going back to the house was weird. I parked a bit away and walked. I grabbed some important papers, clothes, and a few personal things, like this one photo of Sophie when she was a baby. I packed everything into the backpack and the rest in my car's trunk. Then, I found a cheap hotel on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where people stay when they don't want others to ask questions. I paid for a week with cash and got a room on the ground floor. It was basic, a bed, a dresser, and a small bathroom. That's where I sorted my stuff, getting my backpack ready for whatever was next. I barely slept that night. Too many thoughts, too much going through my mind. It was about 3 days after I left home. I still don't know how Clara's brother, Ethan, figured out where I was. Maybe he tracked my car, or maybe the hotel staff gave me away. When I opened it, there he was, standing in the hallway, looking as grim as ever. Ethan didn't waste time with greetings. He just barged in, his eyes scanning the room quickly, taking in the mess. Ethan was always a man of action, a trait that served him well in his job as a cop, but at that moment, I wished he had been anything else. He started right in, demanding to know what I was planning, why I had left without a word, making it clear he thought I was in the wrong for abandoning Clara and Sophie. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That his sister broke me? That I couldn't stand the sight of her or the life we had built together? It seemed pointless to explain. When I stayed silent, Ethan's patience ran out. He grabbed me by the arm, his grip tight, painful even. He wasn't asking anymore, he was telling me we were leaving, that I was going to go home and face the situation. I tried to pull away, but Ethan was stronger. That's when it escalated. He twisted my arm behind my back, and for a moment, I thought he might actually cuff me. The thought made me panic. I hadn't done anything illegal. I was just trying to escape a life that had turned into a lie. In my panic, I managed to yank free, but Ethan was quick to react. He shoved me against the wall, his forearm pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I could see the anger in his eyes, the disappointment. He believed in family, in sorting things out, no matter what. But I couldn't go back, not after everything. The struggle didn't last long. I wasn't in any shape to fight, not against Ethan. He was trained for this, used to dealing with people who resisted. My resistance ended with me on the floor, Ethan standing over me, his face red with effort and anger. He didn't hit me, though. Not then. He just looked down at me, his chest heaving, and he actually left me there. The first thing I did was trade my car for an RV. It was just an older model that someone was willing to swap for my less spacious but newer car. The guy didn't ask too many questions, and I didn't offer any information. We just made the exchange, and I drove off with the RV. Adjusting to life in the RV was a learning curve. Figuring out how to manage my resources, like water and electricity, became part of my daily routine. I found spots to park for the night where I wouldn't draw attention. These were usually quiet, out-of-the-way places where I could stay unnoticed. Living in the RV was different. I had to learn a lot of things fast, like how to conserve water and power. I found places to park overnight where no one would bother me. Most of the time, these were spots just off the highway or in public lands where camping was allowed. I avoided crowded places. The less I interacted with people, the better. It wasn't just about not being found, it was about not forming connections that could make me want to stay put. I kept moving. Every day or two, I'd drive to a new location. I didn't have a map or a specific route, I just went wherever the road took me. The aimlessness of it was both freeing and a bit daunting. I had no destination because I was running away, not heading towards something. Money was a concern at first. I had taken half of our savings, but I knew it wouldn't last forever, especially with gas prices and basic living expenses. So, I started taking on odd jobs. I'd stop in small towns and find work that paid under the table. I did everything from repairing fences to helping out at local farms. I wasn't picky. As long as it paid and didn't require me to stay long or share too much about myself, I was in. Eating was another thing I had to adapt to. I couldn't afford to eat out, so I learned to cook simple meals in the RV. I bought groceries that were easy to store and didn't need refrigeration. I learned which markets had the best prices and when they put items on sale. Every penny counted. Privacy became my top priority. I avoided using my real name or giving out any personal information. I paid everything in cash. I didn't use my phone unless absolutely necessary, and even then, I was cautious about where and when I turned it on. I knew it could be tracked, so I kept it off most of the time. Cutting off contact with everyone I knew was hard, but necessary. Any connection to my past was a risk I couldn't afford. It was part of the sacrifice, part of starting over. This included my family, which was perhaps the hardest part of all. Living on the road had its ups and downs. This new life was my choice, a path I took to escape the pain and betrayal.